She looked fascinating, smart, annoyed. Save me from rich, attractive alpha males. They think they're the heroes from a fairy tale. Little do they know, they're more like the villains. That's not fair, Gretchen, the one called Bronte protested. Life's not fair, Gretchen said in a cheerfully acerbic voice. I'd rather have a man who isn't in love with his own reflection than one who needs hair product or designer labels. She bent over, and that heart-shaped ass was thrust into his vision again, and his cock stirred with need. So you'd rather have a pizza guy with a weak chin and a knight in shining armor complex? Yes, Gretchen said emphatically, and a dimple flashed in her pointed little face. His looks aren't half as important as his brain. So she said. Hunter knew from experience that what women said they wanted in a man was soon forgotten if his physical appearance was unappealing. Still, he was fascinated with her. She was brash and clever and a little sardonic, as if she were as weary of the world as he was. He watched as the two women, arguing and laughing, stepped out of the foyer of the empty home with the boxes of donations that he'd left for Logan's assistant. Her name was Gretchen. Gretchen. He racked his brain trying to think of anyone who knew a Gretchen. A lovely redhead with a charmingly unusual face and a cutting tongue. He wanted to know more about her. Hunter touched the jagged scars running down the left side of his face and frowned. Would she find him as hideous as the rest of the world did? Probably. But she'd also said she could look past that she wasn't interested in a face as much as the brain behind it. He was curious whether she'd been telling the truth. Not that it mattered, since she'd just walked out the door and he'd likely never see her again. A half-buried memory stirred in the back of his mind as he stared at the now-shut door. The other woman had an unusual name, Bronte. He knew that name, and where he'd heard it before. He dialed Logan's number, still thinking about the unusual redhead. "What is it?" Logan said. "I'm about to head into a meeting." "There can't be more than one Bronte running around New York, can there?" Hunter asked. The voice on the other end of the line got very still. "Bronte," Logan asked after a moment. "You saw her. Where is she?" Hunter stared at the door, half wishing the women would come back through it again, and half relieved they wouldn't. "She just left with a redhead named Gretchen. I want to know more about her." "About my Bronte?" Logan's voice was a growl. "No, Gretchen, the one with red hair. I want her." "Oh." A long sigh. "Sorry, man. Haven't been myself lately. She left me, and I've been going crazy trying to find her." Logan's voice sounded strained, tense. "I can't believe she's still in New York. Where are you?" "At the townhouse on the Upper East Side." Hunter had been overseeing it to ensure that nothing was out of place. Plus, he'd been bored and restless, and more than a little lonely. He wasn't lonely anymore, though. He couldn't stop thinking about that redhead. Gretchen, with her big glasses and pert comebacks and red hair. "Your assistant didn't come by to pick up the boxes," Hunter said after a moment. "This Gretchen did, and your Bronte was with her." "I have to go," Logan said. "I'll call Audrey and see who she sent over." "Send me information about this Gretchen woman," Hunter reminded him. "I want her." "I will, and thanks." Logan's tone had changed from dejected to triumphant. "I owe you one." "You do," Hunter agreed. "Just get me information on her friend and we'll call it even." Things had suddenly gotten a bit more interesting. Hunter glanced at the empty townhouse and smiled to himself, his mind full of the unusual woman who had been there minutes before. Chapter 1. Hunter Buchanan didn't believe in love at first sight. Hell, he didn't much believe in love at all. But the moment he'd seen the tall redhead standing in the foyer of one of his empty houses, a box of books in her arms and a skeptical look on her face, he'd felt something. She'd been bold and fearless with her words, something that attracted him as a man who clung to the shadows. And when she'd admitted to her quiet friend that most men bore